The city of Seoul was alive with celebration that night. The grand halls of the Kong family mansion, surrounded by glowing gardens, shone like a modern palace. Crystal chandeliers reflected off the golden walls, and the tables were covered with French champagne, rare flowers, and dishes fit for kings. It was another night of ostentation for South Korea's elite, where businessmen, heirs, and politicians displayed their wealth like invisible crowns. Among waiters in flawless black suits, hurried footsteps, and classical music echoing through the air, walked a young woman who didn't belong.
Ha!
Boon, dressed in the plain uniform of a maid, balanced a tray of glasses in her trembling hands. Her big brown eyes avoided the guests. To her, this world was nothing but a cruel reminder of her condition, poor, invisible, despised.
Ha!
Boon had only recently started working for the Kong family. She had taken the job to pay for her grandmother Sukja's medicine, waiting for her in a small house in Mapogu. Life was hard, but it was the only way to survive. That night, all she wanted was to finish her shift without being noticed. But fate, as always, had other plans. As she moved through the ballroom, dodging long dresses and sharp heels, a voice cut the air, "Watch where you step, you useless girl." The voice belonged to Melissa Choi, only daughter of a wealthy magnate and heiress of an investment empire. She wore a high-fashion red gown, glittering jewels on her neck, and her eyes burned with arrogance.
Ha!
Boon tried to move away, but as she turned, her arm brushed against one of the guests. The tray slipped from her hands. Time seemed to slow, the glasses flew into the air, and red wine splashed down, soaking Melissa's expensive gown. The entire hall fell silent for a second, then exploded in muffled laughter. Melissa looked down at the fabric, stained red like blood, then glared at
Ha!
Boon with contempt. "Look at that. The maid ruined my night. Did anyone here expect anything different from a girl out of the slums?" Her words cut
Ha!
Boon's heart like blades. She tried to apologize, bowing deeply, but Melissa didn't allow it. "Don't bow. Don't apologize. You were born to serve, and nothing else. No matter how hard you try, you'll always be nobody." The guests laughed, some whispering.
Ha!
Boon's eyes burned, but she held back her tears. She refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. Then, in the middle of that cruel scene, someone moved. At the top of the marble staircase, wearing a tailored black suit, stood Ji-hoon Kong, the host and heir to the Kong Corporation. Known as the king of business, Ji-hoon was feared and respected. His cold eyes swept across the ballroom until they landed on the scene. For a moment,
Ha!
Boon and Ji-hoon locked eyes. He saw the humiliation in her gaze, the quiet strength with which she endured it. He said nothing, only watched. And even without speaking, something in him seemed to recognize, this young woman was not like the others. Melissa, noticing his presence, quickly changed her tone. She forced a fake smile and raised her voice, "Don't worry, Mr. Kong. I know how to handle people like her. She's nothing but a stain on your party." But Ji-hoon didn't answer. He simply turned and descended the stairs slowly, his eyes still lingering on
Ha!
Boon, who trembled but kept her head lowered. To everyone else, it was just another night of luxury. But for
Ha!
Boon, it was a humiliation she would never forget. And unknowingly, it was also the beginning of a story that would change her life forever. When she finally managed to slip away, escaping into the corridors of the mansion,
Ha!
Boon leaned against the cold wall, breathing heavily. The tears she had held back now streamed down her face. She felt the pain of being treated as nothing, but in the middle of her crying, a spark ignited. "One day, I'll prove them wrong." That night, the despised.
Ha!
Boon didn't yet know it, but she had just crossed paths with the man who would forever change her destiny, the king of business. After the commotion, the ballroom of the Kong mansion slowly returned to its false normality. The orchestra resumed its music, waiters collected the glasses, and Melissa, still furious, forced an artificial smile, as if nothing had happened. For her, humiliating
Ha!
Boon in public was just another spectacle. But in the quieter corners of the hall, the eyes turned to Ji-hoon Kong. The heir of Kong Corporation, the business empire that ruled from construction to finance, rarely appeared in public. Known for his calculated coldness and his almost supernatural ability to turn any investment into gold, Ji-hoon was called by the media the king of business. While everyone tried to please him, he remained distant, almost untouchable. His presence was like that of a king on a chessboard, silent, but absolute. That night, however, Ji-hoon wasn't interested in flatterers or deals hidden behind champagne toasts. His eyes still carried the image of the maid spilling wine on Melissa and enduring the humiliation in silence. From his privileged view, he had noticed something others ignored, the strength with which Moon held back her tears, the pride that kept her from begging for forgiveness, the determination etched in her face. She wasn't just a servant. There was something different about this woman. When the ball ended, Ji-hoon slipped away to the mansion's winter garden. A quiet place surrounded by tall glass walls and carefully pruned trees. There, under the moon reflected on marble, he lit a cigarette and let the silence surround him. Then, through the glass reflection, he noticed a shadow moving. It was Moon, sent by a housekeeper to collect forgotten glasses. When she realized Ji-hoon was there, she froze. Forgive me, Mr. Kong. I didn't know you were. Her voice trembled, and she lowered her eyes immediately. Ji-hoon exhaled the smoke slowly, unhurried. Then he replied, with the calm that often scared people, "You're not going to ask why I didn't defend you in there?" Love. Moon looked up, surprised. For a moment, she was speechless. Then, she took a breath. There was no need. I'm already used to it. People like me don't have the right to be defended. Her words echoed in the cold night air. Ji-hoon stared at her for a long time, intrigued by her honesty. Interesting, he said, putting out his cigarette on the marble. Most people beg. You didn't. You accepted it, not out of weakness, but because you know you can endure it. Moon didn't fully understand. But the intensity of his gaze made her uneasy. Ji-hoon wasn't just powerful. He had the ability to see beyond appearances, as if reading people like open books. Before she could answer, another voice cut through, Ji-hoon. Melissa appeared, still angry but trying to act sweet. She grabbed his arm with intimacy, as if staking her claim. But her eyes shot daggers at Moon, who was holding the tray. This girl keeps causing trouble. Don't you think we should fire her? Ji-hoon didn't answer right away. His eyes stayed on Moon, who, with quiet dignity, simply bowed slightly and left. Melissa, annoyed at his lack of attention, squeezed his arm. Ji-hoon, are you listening to me? He calmly pulled his arm away and said only, Melissa, sometimes you talk too much. The words froze the air. Melissa turned red with anger but didn't dare answer back to his icy tone. Meanwhile, Moon walked back through the halls toward the kitchen, her heart racing. She had never exchanged so many words with someone like Ji-hoon. That man, so far from her world, had seen something in her that no one else ever had. That night, when she returned to her small room in the Mapogu neighborhood, she still heard his voice echoing in her mind, you accepted it because you know you can endure it. She didn't fully understand what it meant, but she knew that, somehow, that encounter had changed the direction of her life. And for Ji-hoon, lying in his luxurious penthouse suite, the memory of the maid's steady eyes would not let him rest. For the first time in years, something had cracked the coldness of the king of business. The neighborhood of Mapogu wakes up early. Before the sun touches the Han River, the markets are already open, and buses pass crowded with people stuffing time into their backpacks. It was there that Moon learned, very early, that life doesn't usually wait for anyone. When she was 10, the Kim house wasn't big, but it was whole. Her father, Kim Jun, drove a delivery truck. Her mother, Eun-ji, sewed for others on a noisy singer machine that gave rhythm to the nights. On Saturdays, her father took her to buy vegetables at Namdaemun Market and let her count the coins. Whoever learns to count money will never get lost in numbers, he'd say, laughing. Her mother would add, and whoever learns to sew always finds a way to mend holes. Tazendo, oh love. The hole that came later, though, had no patch. On a rainy night, a bus skidded on a curve on Gangbayan Bukaro. Jun's truck was in front. The phone call came the way tragedies always come, cutting sentences in half. At the hospital, the hallway smelled of disinfectant and waiting.
Ha!
Boone remembers her mother's wet coat, the broken umbrella in the corner, and the doctor who couldn't finish the sentence. The next day, the singer fell silent. A heavy silence settled over the house, the kind that sticks to walls. The following months were a series of small losses. The savings disappeared into medicine and fees. The house was given back to the landlord after an eviction notice was pasted to the gate. Sukja, the grandmother, brought pots, the old stove, and her habit of talking to plants. They understand persistence, she said, tending to a thin basil pot on the windowsill. The three of them moved into a narrow room in Mapogu, with windows that didn't close properly in winter.
Ha!
Boone grew inward. At school, she sat in the back row, wrote down everything, and rushed home to help her grandmother prepare jars of kimchi to sell to neighbors. At night, she washed dishes in a small restaurant, where she earned her first scars from hot oil and a quiet respect from the cooks. At 15, she took a second job at a laundry. Hands always wet, nails always short, eyes always fixed on the clock. There were also days when dignity had to fit inside a brown envelope. The creditor, Mr. Han, knocked on the door, his voice slow, almost polite. I understand the moment, but deadlines. Sukja received him with tea and a tired smile.
Ha!
Boone, head held high, asked for more time. I'll pay. Just give me time. He left behind another piece of paper with another deadline, and more weight in the air. Despite everything, the world above never stopped calling her. On some Sundays, after church,
Ha!
Boone walked to the front of Kong Corporation. She stood across the street, staring at that glass tower that seemed to touch the sky. It wasn't envy of the shine, it was curiosity about the mechanism. How do these people decide what matters and what doesn't? She wondered, flipping through old newspapers from the public library. She began cutting out business articles and pasting them in a simple notebook, underlining phrases with a pencil. Discipline is future freedom, numbers don't humiliate, they just show. Her grandmother worried about the tiredness in her eyes. Eat more, she insisted, pushing another plate of rice. At night, before bed, Sukja kept the TV low on old dramas and knitted slowly, while
Ha!
Boone studied for a certification exam that might lead to a slightly better job. In that room, the future was a project paid in installments. One day, her body demanded a break. At the restaurant, without lunch,
Ha!
Boone fainted near the sink. When she opened her eyes, she was sitting on a bench, and Nari, a coworker, was fanning her with a napkin. You need to slow down, she said.
Ha!
Boone smiled crookedly. If I slow down, the bills don't wait. Nari sighed and shoved a cheap chocolate into her bag. Then at least eat this. It was Nari who first mentioned an agency that hired girls for gala events, one-night jobs, pays better. It's rich people, but it's just holding trays and smiling, she assured. At first,
Ha!
Boone refused. She feared what the upper world did to those from below. But the money for her grandmother's exam ran short, and she accepted. She bought used shoes, borrowed a hairpin, and learned, in one afternoon, the invisible map of a luxurious hall, who to avoid, when to step back, when to disappear. On her first night at one of those events, someone spilled wine on a tablecloth and blamed the new girl.
Ha!
Boone swallowed the explanation without a word. On the second, a guest tried to grab her wrist. She pulled away firmly, and the cold look she threw back was the first sign that inside her there was something no one could crush. On the third, the invitation came with an address, the Kong Mansion. The rest, the world saw. The red dress stained, the cutting laughter, the word nobody stuck to her like a label. But what no one saw, and this always stayed hidden, was the silent decision born there. In the service bathroom, hands gripping the cold porcelain sink.
Ha!
Boone breathed 3 times and whispered to the cracked mirror, I will not be defined by this. Not by them. When she got home that dawn, Sukja was awake, tea steaming, eyes that already knew before hearing. Did they hurt you? She asked.
Ha!
Boone shook her head, lying just enough to let her grandmother sleep. Later, she sat on the floor, opened her notebook of clippings, and next to a graph about conglomerate profits, she wrote, dignity is the only asset they can't take. The rest I'll win back. In the following days, she returned to her routine like someone rearranging furniture after an earthquake. But there was a new phrase echoing in her mind, the words of a tall man in a black suit who had looked at her without turning away. You accepted it because you know you can endure it. Endurance she already knew. What she didn't know yet was that the same glass tower she had stared at so many Sundays would soon open a door with her name on it. And that, on the chessboard of those who decide what matters and what doesn't, someone had finally noticed the value she had always carried. Because before being the despised one,
Ha!
Un was a daughter, a granddaughter, a shop girl, a laundress, a student with borrowed pages, a collector of phrases, a counter of coins. All of that, quietly, prepared the ground for the woman who, one day, would face crowded ballrooms without lowering her eyes. The past hurt, yes. But it hurt like a muscle growing, and with it grew the certainty that a nickname is not a destiny. The Kong Corporation skyscraper rose like a blade of glass against Seoul's sky. Anyone passing by had to tilt their head back to see it in full, and many said the shadow of that tower could swallow entire city blocks. 4.
Ha!
Un, who had so often stared at it from afar with her notebook on her lap, standing before it now as a temporary employee felt impossible. The morning after the party, when she received the unexpected call to report to the building, her first instinct was to refuse. It must be a mistake, she thought. But the mansion's housekeeper assured her, Ji-hoon Kong himself wanted to see her.
Ha!
Un spent the whole night awake. She had no proper clothes, so she wore the best she owned, a simple white blouse and a navy skirt that had already lost its shine. She tied her hair in a rushed bun and, facing the cracked mirror, took a deep breath. It's just another job. Don't expect anything more than that. When she entered the main lobby, she felt even smaller. White marble reflected the sunlight pouring through 10-meter-tall windows. Men and women in sharp suits hurried by, talking on cell phones and carrying leather briefcases. The clock struck 9 as the receptionist told her to go up to the top floor. The glass elevator rose in silence, and with each floor,
Ha!
Un watched the city shrink beneath her feet. Her stomach churned, but she kept her chin up. She would not let fear betray her. The doors opened onto a silent, minimalist hallway where everything gleamed. At the end, a wide office with glass walls displayed Seoul like a living model. There, leaning against a dark wooden desk, stood Ji-hoon Kong. He wore no tie, only a flawless black suit. His eyes were fixed on documents, yet his posture made it clear he already knew exactly what was written in every line. When
Ha!
Un entered, he slowly lifted his gaze. You came. His voice was firm, unhurried.
Ha!
Un bowed slightly. They told me you wanted to see me. If this is about last night, I can promise it won't happen again. Ji-hoon walked to the window. Behind him, the skyline stretched in golden lines. I'm not interested in apologies. I'm interested in you. The words dropped heavy in the air.
Ha!
Un, confused, clasped her hands in front of her. I don't understand. He turned, meeting her eyes with the same intensity as the night before. Last night, everyone laughed. You didn't. You accepted the humiliation, but you didn't beg. That's not submission. That's resistance.
Ha!
Un felt her face burn. She didn't know if it was shame or anger. If I had reacted, I would have lost my job. My grandmother depends on me. Sometimes resisting means staying silent. Ji-hoon analyzed every word as if they were numbers on a spreadsheet. Then, the faintest smile touched his lips. Smart answer. He returned to his desk, opened a folder, and slid it toward her. Papers lay blank except for one line at the top, contract proposal.
Ha!
Un's eyes widened. Contract? What are you talking about? Ji-hoon leaned back in his chair, fingers interlaced. I need someone by my side. Someone who doesn't belong to this world, but can survive in it. You proved you can. Last night, in just a few seconds, I saw more courage in you than in many who call themselves business leaders. Her heart pounded. Everything felt like a trap. Why me? You barely know me. Ji-hoon leaned forward, his gaze locked on hers. Exactly. You owe me nothing. You're not here to steal my place, or to inherit my empire. You're here because you know what it means to lose. And people who know loss rarely waste victory. The silence between them was heavy, broken only by the distant hum of the city.
Ha!
Boon didn't know what to say. She had never imagined being seen by someone like Ji-hoon, not as a maid, not as a shadow, but as someone who mattered. Before she could form a reply, the door opened. It was Melissa Choi. With a venomous smile, she stepped in without knocking. Well, the maid has become the guest of honor. Ji-hoon didn't take his eyes off.
Ha!
Boon. Melissa, come back later. I'm in a meeting. Melissa froze, stunned that he had dismissed her for a mere servant. The look she shot at
Ha!
Boon was pure hatred.
Ha!
Boon, feeling the weight of that hostility, instinctively stepped back. But Ji-hoon remained firm. This conversation isn't over. Think about the proposal. As she left the room, legs trembling,
Ha!
Boon couldn't tell if she was walking into a nightmare or a new destiny. But one thing was certain, her first real encounter with Ji-hoon wasn't the end of humiliation, it was only the beginning of something much greater. In the days that followed their meeting,
Ha!
Boon's mind found no rest. The word contract echoed like an endless bell. What exactly did the king of business want from her? It made no sense. She was just a temporary maid at events. Why would someone like Ji-hoon Kong choose her of all people? The world, however, seemed determined to deepen her torment. In Mapogu, her grandmother Sukja's health worsened with each passing week. Doctor visits became more frequent, and the medicine more expensive.
Ha!
Boon stretched her working hours like someone trying to hold water in her hands, always slipping away, always never enough. One rainy afternoon, she received an unexpected call. The receptionist at Kong Corporation asked her to come to the building immediately.
Ha!
Boon almost refused. But when she thought of the pile of medical bills on her grandmother's table, she put on the same modest outfit, a navy skirt and plain white blouse, and went. At the top floor, she was welcomed by the elegant silence of Ji-hoon's office. He was seated at his desk, reviewing documents with the focus of a man who commanded empires. When he finally lifted his eyes, the world seemed to stop. Sit. His voice carried authority, calm but absolute.
Ha!
Boon obeyed, hands folded in her lap. You said you wanted to see me. About the contract? Ji-hoon leaned forward. Exactly. I want you to marry me. The words came so quickly, so blunt, that
Ha!
Boon thought she had misheard. Her heart pounded, and she pulled back slightly in the chair. What did you say? Marry you. Is this some kind of cruel joke? Ji-hoon remained calm, as if discussing a business merger. It's no joke. It's a business proposal. I need a wife. Not for love, not for romance. But because the company board and the media are pressuring me to stabilize my image. They want me to marry Melissa Choi. And I will not allow that. The name Melissa hit the air like a stone.
Ha!
Boon remembered the hateful eyes of the rival that night. And what does that have to do with me? She asked, incredulous. Ji-hoon crossed his hands on the desk. You don't belong to this world.
Ha!
Boon. That's exactly why you're perfect. You're not after my money or my power. I need someone who doesn't play the same games as the elite. Someone who can sign a contract and fulfill her part without creating complications.
Ha!
Boon let out a nervous, almost desperate laugh. Do you think it's that simple? A contract, a marriage, and that's it? I'm just a maid. No one will accept this. I'd become a target for scandals, for humiliations, even worse than what I've already endured. Ji-hoon's eyes burned into hers. You've survived worse before. Don't tell me you couldn't survive again. She fell silent, swallowing hard. The weight of her life was written all over her face. And he knew it. And why should I accept? She finally managed, her voice trembling. Ji-hoon then opened a folder and placed it on the desk. Inside were contracts, medical funds, health coverage, hospital guarantees. Because if you accept, your grandmother will receive the best medical treatment. Every cost covered. And you will have stability, protection, and a future that now seems impossible. In return, all you need to do is live by my side and maintain the appearance of a stable marriage. Love, love, love.
Ha!
Eun's hands shook. The image of her grandmother coughing, weak in her chair, pierced her thoughts. The choice crushed her, dignity or survival. Pride or salvation. And if I refuse, she whispered. Ji-hoon didn't hesitate. Then I'll never hear your name again. You'll go back to your life in Mapogu, and we'll carry on as if we never met. But know this, opportunities like this don't come twice. Only the rain tapping against the skyscraper's windows broke the silence.
Ha!
Eun felt as though she stood at the edge of a cliff. The decision seemed impossible. Yet when her eyes fell on the papers, a phrase flashed in her mind, "I'll pay. Just give me time." It was what she always told the creditors. But time was running out. Breath heavy with conflict.
Ha!
Eun didn't answer right away. But Ji-hoon saw in her eyes that the seed was already planted. He stood, walked to the window, and said only, "Think carefully."
Ha!
Eun. You can stay the despised one, or you can become my wife. The decision wasn't made in a single day.
Ha!
Eun spent sleepless nights staring at the low ceiling of her room in Mapogu, listening to her grandmother's tired breathing beside her. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the documents Ji-hoon had laid on the desk. A contract marriage. A life turned upside down. But with every cough from Sukja, every missing pill on the shelf, the weight of the choice tilted further. It wasn't about her. It had never been about her. It was about giving her grandmother the rest she deserved after a lifetime of struggle. The morning she returned to the Kong Corporation skyscraper, her heart felt ready to burst from her chest. Ji-hoon received her with his usual calm, as if he already knew her answer before she even spoke. "I accept."
Ha!
Eun's voice was steady, though her hands trembled. Ji-hoon simply nodded. No smile, no surprise. Good choice. From now on, you are no longer just
Ha!
Eun. You are my wife. The lawyers came in with stacks of papers, clauses, and signatures.
Ha!
Eun barely understood half of what she read, but every time she held the pen, she thought of her grandmother. And so, with one stroke of ink, she sealed the fate that would change her life forever. The news didn't take long to explode in the press. Ji-hoon Kong announces marriage to unknown woman. Headlines ran across LED screens in Gangnam, gossip magazines fought over photos of
Ha!
Eun, and social media burned with comments, "Who is this girl? Where did she come from? Has he lost his mind?" In the mansions of the elite, the reaction was unanimous, shock and contempt. How could one of the most powerful men in Korea marry a nobody? To many, it was an insult. And to Melissa Choi, it was a declaration of war. The night she heard the confirmation, Melissa stormed into Ji-hoon's penthouse, her heels striking the marble like hammers. She found him in his office, calmly reviewing reports as if nothing had happened. "Have you lost your mind?" she shouted, throwing a magazine on his desk. The cover showed
Ha!
Eun's picture with the headline, "The Commoner Who Stole the King of Business." Como Asim. Ji-hoon didn't even lift his eyes. "If you have something relevant to business, say it. If it's about my personal life, the door is open." Melissa slammed her hand on the desk, her face burning. "I'm the logical choice. I grew up in this world, I know every detail of your company, I've always been by your side. And you replace me with a maid? This is humiliating." Finally, Ji-hoon raised his eyes, cold as steel. "Exactly. You've always been by my side, because you wanted something in return.
Ha!
Eun wants nothing from me. And that's why she was chosen." Melissa froze, but didn't back down. She stepped closer, her voice dripping with venom. "Do you think she can survive in this world? Do you think others will accept her? They will destroy her. And when that happens, it will be your responsibility. Ji-hoon didn't respond. He returned to his reports, ending the conversation. But Melissa left with silent fire in her eyes. If Ji-hoon had stolen her future, she would do everything to turn Boon's life into hell. Meanwhile, Boon's life became a storm. Paparazzi followed her through the streets, neighbors whispered on the corners of Mapogu, and even old acquaintances looked at her as if she were someone else. To the elite, she was an intruder. To the lower class, a traitor who had crossed the line. The first time she stepped into the Kong penthouse, her chest tightened. The apartment looked more like a suspended palace, with windows that showed Seoul as a sea of lights. But the grandeur weighed on her like chains. Every detail reminded her she didn't belong. At the first business dinners, the contempt was obvious. The wives of magnates whispered among themselves, their muffled laughs louder than clinking silverware. One even commented loud enough for all to hear, "It's impressive how some people know how to sell themselves well." Boon pretended not to hear, but her face burned. She tried to hide behind her glass of wine, but she felt every gaze pressing down on her. Then Ji-hoon, silent until that moment, broke the men's conversation and said firmly, without looking at anyone in particular, "My wife is at my side. Whoever has a problem with that can leave." The room went dead silent. For the first time, Boon realized Ji-hoon wasn't just fulfilling a contract. Somehow, he was protecting her. But for every gesture of protection he gave, Melissa's fury grew like fire in the wind. Alone in her mansion, she stared into the mirror and whispered, "If he thinks that girl can take my place, then I'll show everyone who she really is." And so, while Boon tried to adapt to her new world, an invisible war was already brewing in the shadows, a war that would test her courage and her dignity like never before. Life at the Kong penthouse felt like living on another planet. From the 55th floor, Seoul looked like a miniature of glass and light. But for Boon, that luxurious view didn't bring comfort, it brought pressure. Every detail of the apartment, from the modern sculptures to the grand piano in the center of the room, reminded her that she didn't belong in that world. In the first days, she avoided using the massive bed and chose the sofa instead, as if lying under expensive sheets was an invasion. With every meal prepared by private chefs, she remembered the simple rice she cooked for her grandmother in Mapogu. But the heaviest weight didn't come from the golden walls, it came from people's eyes. The shock at social events. The contract marriage quickly placed Boon at the center of the elite. She followed Ji-hoon to business dinners, gala receptions, and shareholder meetings. Every smile around her hid judgment. At one event at the Imperial Seoul Hotel, Boon wore an elegant dress borrowed from one of Ji-hoon's stylists. She walked beside him, but whispers followed her like shadows. "Look at her, she doesn't fit in this scene at all. Does she even know how to hold a French fork?" The magnates' wives threw sharp glances, and even some executives laughed quietly. Boon tried to stay composed, but every word cut deep, like invisible knives. Then one guest, smiling with irony, asked her directly, "So, Mrs. Kong, what do you think of the current economic policy?" The entire hall seemed to hold its breath, waiting for her to stumble. Boon took a deep breath. She remembered the newspaper clippings she had collected since she was a teenager and answered calmly, "I don't think it's about politics, but about impact. A company cannot grow if it forgets the people who build that growth." The silence lasted a few seconds until Ji-hoon, without changing his expression, added, "Exactly what I say at every board meeting." His words shut the whispers. But the contempt didn't disappear. The invisible war Melissa, of course, never stayed away. She appeared at every event, flawless, always insinuating herself. She approached Boon with a false smile. "You must feel out of place. This isn't really a world for someone like you, is it?" Boon swallowed her anger but answered with dignity, "Maybe. But if I'm here, it's because he chose me." Every exchange was a silent battle, and Melissa never left without dropping a hidden threat. Boon's transformation over time, the pressure began to shape something inside Boon. Fear gave way to observation. Instead of hiding in the corners, she started listening to conversations, understanding how alliances were formed and how power moved across the dinner tables. At Kong Corporation, when she accompanied Ji-hoon to meetings, she surprised herself by understanding financial terms she had only read in newspapers. One day, she dared to suggest a campaign idea to bring the company closer to the public. Ji-hoon looked at her for a long moment and, to the director's surprise, said, "Good idea. Let's consider it." The rumor spread quickly, maybe the despised wife wasn't as naive as everyone thought. Ji-hoon's human side. Despite his public coldness, Ji-hoon began to show a side few people knew. He protected Hoon in public with the same authority he used to sign contracts. But at home, in the silence of the penthouse, moments of vulnerability appeared. One night, he found her on the balcony, staring at the city. "Why do you still look afraid?" he asked. Hoon kept her eyes on the lights of Seoul. "Because I know I don't belong here. To everyone else, I'm just a shadow at your side." Ji-hoon stayed quiet for a moment, then said, "Shadows are necessary too. They remind the light that it doesn't exist alone." Hoon turned to him, surprised by the metaphor. For the first time, she realized the cold man before her might also carry wounds no one else could see. The weight of the contract. Even so, the contract hung between them like an invisible wall. The world believed in their marriage, but for Hoon, every gesture was a reminder that it was all just an agreement. Yet inside her, an uncomfortable doubt began to grow. What if, in the middle of all this contempt, something real was being born? As the city slept, under skyscraper shadows and glittering ballrooms, Hoon fought between two worlds. The one that rejected her for her origins and the one trying to mold her into something she wasn't. Between the two, a new version of her began to emerge, stronger, sharper, more ready to resist. But even this growing strength couldn't prepare her for the next blow, the trap Melissa was about to set. Ji-hoon Kang's prestige was untouchable, but Hoon's presence by his side was still a thorn in the heart of the elite. And for Melissa Choi, it wasn't just discomfort, it was a personal insult. Melissa grew up believing she would become the wife of the most powerful man in Korea. To her, it was destiny, a right, almost an inheritance. But suddenly, a girl from Mapogu, a maid with no family name, had taken the place that was hers. At every event, with every small smile Ji-hoon gave Hoon, Melissa's anger grew like fire in the wind. But she wasn't only arrogant, she was calculating. And she was ready to use all the weapons of the elite, rumors, documents, and manipulation. Crossed swords. The beginning of the trap. On a rainy afternoon, Melissa welcomed a middle-aged man into her mansion, thin, in a cheap suit, Mr. Han, a well-known lender from Mapogu. "I want everything you know about Hoon," she ordered, crossing her legs and lighting a cigarette. Han grinned with yellow teeth. "She's owed me money since her restaurant days. I've got receipts, old notes, nothing huge, but," Melissa raised an eyebrow. "But enough to look like a scandal, if told the right way." And so the scheme began. In a few days, newspapers started receiving anonymous files about Hoon's past, the business king's wife hides debts. Hoon, ambition disguised as humility. Blogs and gossip magazines spread the story, painting her as a gold digger who had used her grandmother's illness as an excuse to sneak into the elite world. Dagger tornado. The public strike. The trap reached its peak at a major business event at the Imperial Seoul Hotel. Politicians, businessmen, and the press filled the hall. Hoon, in a navy blue dress, tried to keep her composure at Ji-hoon's side, even as flashes and whispers surrounded her. In the middle of the cocktail party, Melissa made her grand entrance, like an actress waiting for her cue. With a rehearsed smile, she walked straight toward the couple. "Ji-hoon, dear, congratulations on your marriage. But are you sure about the woman at your side?" Her voice was sweet, but her words were sharp. Before he could reply, Melissa raised papers for the journalists to see. "Here is proof that your beloved wife once owed money to loan sharks. A woman desperate for money, and now, conveniently, married to Korea's richest man. Coincidence?" The hall erupted in whispers. Photographers rushed forward, flashes exploding like war. Boone felt the floor vanish beneath her feet. Her hands shook, her face burned. She wanted to defend herself, but no words came out. Melissa's eyes burned with hatred as she pressed on. Do you really think someone like her married for love? Or is this just another transaction disguised as romance? High voltage.
Ha!
Boone's fall. The next day's headlines were merciless, the commoner with hidden debts. From maid to wife, meteoric rise or calculated scheme? The business king fooled by love? At the Kong penthouse?
Ha!
Boone broke down. She locked herself in her room, hugging her knees. Everything she had built with effort, all the dignity she had tried to hold, crumbled under the lies. Maybe they're right. Maybe I really don't belong here, she whispered, staring at the Seoul skyline. The memory of her grandmother's smile, even in pain, was the only thing that stopped her from collapsing completely. Sun Crescent Moon, Ji-hoon's choice. Meanwhile, Ji-hoon watched in silence. The pressure from the Kong Corporation board grew heavier. Some directors approached him, suggesting he annul the marriage to protect the company's image. But Ji-hoon, sitting in his glass office, stayed calm. No anger, no surprise. Just thinking, as if planning a move on a chessboard. That night, he entered
Ha!
Boone's room. She, still crying, stood up in fear. If you came to tell me to leave, you don't need to. I can go right now. Ji-hoon walked to the window, staring at the glowing city. Then, in a firm voice, he said, I won't send you away. The question is, will you resist? Because if you do, I'll be by your side.
Ha!
Boone looked at him, shocked. But everyone believes her. Everyone hates me. How can I endure this? Ji-hoon turned to her, stepping closer. For the first time, his eyes held something beyond coldness, something deeper. Because I believe in you. And because, from now on, this isn't just a contract. The words hit her like lightning, cutting through darkness. For the first time, Ji-hoon admitted there was more than business between them. Moon viewing ceremony, the calm before the turn. As
Ha!
Boone clung to those words, Melissa celebrated her victory, convinced she had destroyed her rival. But she didn't know that in the cold heart of the business king, the decision was already made. He wouldn't just defend
Ha!
Boone. He would choose her, in front of everyone. And the world, which had laughed at the despised maid, was about to witness the most unexpected turn of all. The scandal sparked by Melissa Choi spread like wildfire. In less than a week,
Ha!
Boone's name had become the subject of cruel headlines: the ambitious maid, a marriage bot, the commoner's scheme. Every time she stepped outside, paparazzi surrounded her with cameras and microphones, shouting questions that sounded more like insults. How much did you charge to marry him? Is it true you used your grandmother's illness to manipulate Ji-hoon Kong? Even with Kong Corporation's security around her,
Ha!
Boone felt naked before the world. In the Kong penthouse, she locked herself away for hours, avoiding even her own reflection. What hurt most wasn't the newspapers, but the voices inside her. Maybe they're right. Maybe I should never have agreed. Leaf fluttering in wind, preparing for the event. That month, the annual investment gala at the Imperial Seoul Hotel, one of the most important business events of the year, was approaching. Politicians, bankers, international investors, and the entire press would be there. Melissa planned to use it as the final blow to
Ha!
Boone and Ji-hoon's marriage. But to everyone's shock, Ji-hoon announced he would attend, with his wife. Backstage at the hotel,
Ha!
Boone trembled before the mirror. She wore a simple yet elegant white silk dress. The stylist worked quickly, while her grandmother, Sukja, held her hand gently. You don't need to be afraid, my girl. People speak badly only because they fear your strength.
Ha!
Boone took a deep breath. Her heart pounded like a drum. Night with stars, the public confrontation. When she walked into the grand hall on Ji-hoon's arm, the world seemed to hold its breath. The lights shimmered on her dress, but all eyes were locked on her. Whispers, cameras, ironic smiles, nothing was hidden. At the center, Melissa stood waiting like a crowned queen. Wearing a stunning red gown, her eyes gleamed with triumph, her smile dripping with victory. As soon as the couple entered, Melissa stepped forward. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we celebrate the greatest names in business. But how can we trust a man who can't even choose his wife wisely? Guests murmured, journalists raised their cameras. Melissa lifted the forged papers once again. Here is proof that Boone is nothing but an opportunist. Debts, a stained past, lies. Is this what you want as the First Lady of Kong Corporation? The hall erupted with voices, flashes, and fake outrage. Boone felt the floor tilt beneath her feet. Her hands shook. But before she could retreat, Ji-hoon stepped forward. Speaking head medium skin tone emoji modifier the king's voice. Ji-hoon raised his hand, and silence fell instantly. The weight of his authority was undeniable. He looked at Melissa, then at the crowd. Yes. Boone once had debts. Yes, she has suffered. But understand this, that makes her stronger than anyone here who was born into privilege. While you inherited power, she survived the real world. His words struck like thunder. Melissa's eyes widened in disbelief. He had just admitted Boone's past, but twisted it into strength. Ji-hoon continued, now taking Boone's hand in his. She is not my wife by accident. Not for convenience. Boone is the woman I chose. And whoever dares to disrespect her, will be disrespecting me. The hall fell into a heavy silence. Some guests swallowed hard, others looked away. Journalists fired flashes like they were desperate to capture history in the making. Boone, tears in her eyes, could hardly believe it. For the first time, someone defended her not as a maid, not as part of a contract, but as his wife. Wilted flower Melissa's fall. Melissa tried to fight back, her voice trembling. You're going to throw away your entire reputation for her. Ji-hoon's reply was cold, sharp. My reputation doesn't need your approval, Melissa. And neither does my heart. The blow was fatal. Melissa, humiliated in front of the elite, stormed out of the hall, her pride shattered. Sparkles the unexpected triumph in that moment, the despised maid became a queen. Boone, still in shock, squeezed Ji-hoon's hand tightly. He didn't smile, but his eyes burned into hers with rare intensity. Before the entire elite, the business king had chosen. Not the perfect heiress, not the ideal bride for the magazines, but the woman the world tried to destroy. And the world would never forget the night when a maid dared to face the elite, not alone, but beside the man who chose her above all. Cityscape at dusk. The night of the gala night stayed engraved in the memory of everyone who witnessed it. In the days that followed, the headlines shifted. The same newspapers that once called her a schemer now printed lines such as, "The business king breaks his silence, declares love for his wife." From despised to respected, who is Boone, the woman who won Ji-hoon Kang's heart? On social media, the tide also turned. Many saw it as a modern fairy tale, the scorned maid who became the wife of the most powerful man in Korea. Others still doubted, calling it a publicity stunt. But, for the first time, Boone didn't care. At the Kong penthouse, life felt different. Not because the criticism had disappeared, it never would. But because, beside Ji-hoon, she no longer felt invisible. One sunny morning, while they shared coffee overlooking Seoul's horizon, Boone dared to ask, "Why did you do it? Why defend me in front of everyone?" Ji-hoon set his cup down and answered without hesitation, "Because I don't want just a contract wife. I want you." The words hit her like an unexpected confession. For the first time, the contract seemed to fade, replaced by something real, something no ink could ever sign. Classical building recognition. Before society. Weeks later, Ji-hoon took her to the Kong Corporation annual conference, with shareholders, businessmen, and journalists gathered from across the country. On stage, before thousands of eyes, Ji-hoon did the unthinkable. He invited Boone to stand by his side. "This is Boone Kong, my wife." Many judged her without knowing her. But let me be clear, without her, I wouldn't be here. Because a true king does not rule alone. He needs someone who reminds him of the value of what cannot be bought. The auditorium erupted in applause, some forced, others genuine. But it didn't matter. That public moment sealed
Ha!
Boon's new place, no longer the despised outsider, but the wife of the business king. Leaf fluttering in wind, a reunion with the past. That same night,
Ha!
Boon returned to Meipogu. She walked through the narrow streets where she had grown up, now with discreet bodyguards at her side. She passed the small restaurant where she once washed dishes, saw the corner shop where she counted coins with her father, and stopped in front of the little house where she once lived with her grandmother. Sukja, overwhelmed, hugged her tightly. I always knew, my girl. I always knew you were not born to be despised.
Ha!
Boon's tears flowed freely. There, in the simplicity of her past, she realized her true victory wasn't the penthouse luxury or the headlines. It was knowing that, even when despised, she never lost her essence. Leaf fluttering in wind, sun. The final turning point. Sometime later, at a small private dinner with a few close friends, Jihoon raised his glass and, looking directly at
Ha!
Boon, declared, from today, I won't speak of contracts anymore. I'll speak of the future. Because she is not just my wife before others. She is the woman I chose to walk beside me until the end. The guests toasted, and
Ha!
Boon, with quiet tears, smiled. For the first time, she truly believed she had nothing left to prove. Sparkles from despised to queen, from a humiliated maid at a party to the respected wife of Korea's most powerful man.
Ha!
Boon's journey was marked by pain, resilience, and courage. The world tried to crush her, but she rose stronger. And so, under Seoul's shining lights, hand in hand with Jihoon on the penthouse terrace, she finally understood, she was not just the wife of the business king. She was the woman who turned scorn into strength, and a contract into true love.
Hey, did you like this story? Then hit subscribe to Between Lies and Love so you won't miss the next chapters. Don't forget to like this video. It really helps us bring you more emotional, anime-style K-drama stories. And I want to know, what was your favorite part of this story? What do you think we could do better in the next episodes? Leave your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one, and your idea might even show up in the next video. So subscribe, like, comment, and join this family that loves drama, twists, and unforgettable stories.